This week's Lockdown Live is about autoimmune disease, which reminded me about one of the best moments of my career after my sister-in-law, Sandy, was diagnosed with autoimmune hepatitis, and she was eventually actually put on the liver transplant list. I'm so very grateful to have been fortunate enough to have studied with some great teachers who gave me the tools to help her avoid this course of events. Anyway, here's Sandy's story. Hello, this is
Hello.
this is
Sorry.
Sandy, who many people know is Macho's sister-in-law, and we had a really interesting and challenging time a few years back with her diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis. And I thought it'd be quite interesting to speak to Sandy about how it went from her perspective. So, Sandy, let's know what your story is.
Um, it's quite a long story, but I'll try and be brief about it. So basically, in my last year at the university in 2001, I became unwell and I'd had a couple of bouts of food poisoning and was feeling quite sluggish and had a bit of a bad year generally. And I was losing weight and feeling muddled and not quite myself. And it was actually you who said, I think something's not quite right here. You need to go and get some tests, go to the doctors, alert them. Because it was quite an odd situation, and it always has been when it had a flare up. I always just feel a bit confused and muddled and like, come on, pull yourself out of it. So I went to the doctors anyway, and the doctor actually sent me to hospital. Was thanks to your letter. And when I was there, they were asking me lots and lots of questions, and they were saying things like, "Oh, do you feel sluggish? Do you feel tired? Do you have any jaundice? Do you have any of these things?" And basically reeled off this huge list of things that I was having constantly, but were fluctuating. And I said, yeah, I feel all these things. I said, oh, okay, well, if they get really bad, come back to us, but we'll see you again. I can't remember when the next time they were going to see me, because what happened as I was leaving is I actually collapsed in the hospital and got admitted straight away anyway. And I was a bit of a conundrum for the doctors then. I was 21 at this point, and they asked me several questions about whether I'd done certain things, because they were trying to figure out what was wrong with me. And what followed was a long period of time of going back and forth to the hospital and them testing me and coming out with this diagnosis of autoimmune hepatitis, and then saying they're not quite sure why I would have it at my age, etc. Then gradually things started to adjust, and when I was about 29, I'd been teaching solidly and working far too hard and not really looking after myself. I could tend to get very sort of wrapped up in things, and I get really poorly again. And again, you swooped in and rescued me, and really got me back on the mend.
Because that time you were living away, weren't you?
I was living away. I was in Kent at that point. I'd really been throwing myself into my work, and it got to the point where other people around me were saying, "I don't think you're very well." I'm like, "No, I'm fine. I'm fine." And then I just wasn't. Once I stopped, allowed myself to stop, I actually plummeted quite a bit and could do very little. And I remember that January, it's snowing, and being with you guys actually, and your son comparing the colour of my skin to the colour of snow and saying what stark contrast there is between your jaundice and the snow. But yeah, I was really weak, really run down. And once again, you built me up and got me back on track with a really, really good diet and different supplements and all of your magic. And I attempted to return to work again full time, couldn't really quite manage it. And then I guess the next big key moment was in 2014. I'd had ovarian surgery in the April, and I'd had that in London because the local hospital weren't happy to operate on me given my past history. It had been quite a stressful year, and I just had a cyst removed. It was quite a big cyst. And then we had quite a challenging year that year as well, because my father was unwell. And then in the October, I'd started to feel run down again. And I had gone back to the doctors and said, oh, I'm not quite right. And I'm a bit concerned because obviously I had this surgery in April. Is it connected to anything to do with this? And they were very relaxed about it. Oh, well, we'll see. We'll do some tests. I was like, oh, okay. And so I got to the point where I was like, well, they're being very relaxed. Maybe I'm, over panicking here. Come on, pull yourself together, keep going. To the point where I kept trying to go to work and wasn't quite right. And I basically collapsed on the train on the way to work. And the staff were fantastic, actually, and escorted me back and looked after me so well all the way back from Havant. And eventually a doctor came out to see me, and then it was me being rushed into hospital very quickly after everything being somewhat lackluster. And I was taken into surgery because I was bleeding internally. And as is the way, I wasn't really very aware of what was going on. I think it was impacting other people more so than me. But during that time, I had rebanding done, and I had 2 blood transfusions.
Just go back a second. The actual bleeding was esophageal varices, wasn't it?
Yes,
yeah.
due to varices.
The pressure coming from the liver itself coming from the vessels, and there was bleeding. So they did the rebanding to try and tie the bleeding vessels off, didn't they? That was
yeah, absolutely. That's exactly it. I'm sorry for
that bit.
Yeah, and so I was really poorly, and the doctors were quite shocked at the state that I was in. And like I said, I had to have a blood transfusion during that process of being rebanded because I'd lost so much blood. And then I had to have another one a couple of days later. And as is the case, it was sort of afterwards it started to hit me how poorly I'd been. I remember after being rebanded, the next day, the doctor who'd seen me on arrival coming up to the high dependency unit and looking at me and going, "Oh, you're here. Yeah, okay." And I was like, "Oh, yeah, I'm here. Thank you for everything." Although I couldn't really speak because I'd had a pipe down my throat. It's like, "It's so good to see you. I'm just so relieved. I've got to get to my shift." And then afterwards, my mum sort of explained what had happened and the severity of it and how, I'd got there in the nick of time, basically. And then what followed after that, I was transferred to
Bourne. Follow on that slightly, if I may. At the time, I was the children obviously a little bit younger. Julie was down at the hospital with your mum, waiting for you, and the doctor had come out and gave them the talk and said, "Look, you know how seriously ill this is. It's touch and go to get through the surgery." They knew that, but it was a bolt out of the blue for them to hear that. And I remember the telephone calls vividly. But obviously you weren't party to that because you were on the table. But
yeah, I remember Julie and Mum saying afterwards, we were told that you'd be in there about 45 minutes. And I think about 3.5 hours later, they still hadn't heard anything. And it was the doctor who'd performed the procedure who saw them and or like you said, told them, "Do you realise what's happened?" And then that's when I was taken up to high dependency unit. And I just remember having lots of wires in me, having an oxygen mask on, and Julie and Mum trying to tell me what's happened and saying, "Oh, well, you are bleeding inside." And I said, "Well, how have they got in there?" I was expecting to see these big wounds on my chest because I couldn't fathom how it all gone together. But the funny thing is about that time, there's really vivid moments that I remember, like seeing my insides on the screen when they were rebanding me, but then passing out, but they're holding me down because I was really kind of struggling, not because I was being difficult, but because it was quite stressful. And so it was a very, very bizarre time. And what followed that was the doctors decided, right, you've got to have a liver transplant. That's your only option now. So we are going to do this, this, and this. You'll be working with Hospital in London, and that's the only way forward. I was like, right, okay.
Wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was like, wow.
How seriously ill you'd been and the surgery you'd had to go through. The only way they could reduce that portal hypertension that coming back into your esophagus causing those varices was to completely replace your liver with somebody else's. That was the only option.
Yeah.
Because of the autoimmune reaction attacking your own liver cells. So how did that feel like being told that you were going to be on the transplant list?
It was really, really bizarre. Again, it doesn't feel quite real when you're in it. I remember speaking to one of the doctors about it, and then also considering the possibility of, a transplant might not work as well. And you think you're going to do that and it might not work. And also there's a chance that it could work, but maybe 5 years later, it doesn't stay successful. And it was, it was really shocking. And it was kind of, okay, let's get on with this. I remember then the next stage of that process of going up to London to be assessed for a transplant. And I don't mean this to sound rude or anything, but I remember looking around the room because there was 3 of us all being assessed today to see who would next get the next transplant, because obviously it's a very costly affair and it's making sure it's compatible and all those elements. And I remember looking at other people and I think, I look so much healthier than they do. They look really, really poorly. And even though I've been through everything I've been through, I was like, no, I'm definitely not as poorly as these people are. But I remember it being quite going through that process, being prepared for what the surgery would be like, what they would do to me beforehand, afterwards, a really long, a long process and quite a scary one, really, in terms of they want to put another pipe down my throat, and I'm not great. I'm quite sensitive about my throat. And I remember then coming to see you again, of course, and you having quite a big discovery at that moment. So I'll let you explain what you discovered.
Well, I remember you going back with the news that you've been told you were on the transplant list. And I remember we had this conversation. I said, well, look, if you have a transplant, that is it. There is no coming back from that. That once it's done, it's done. You'll be on anti-rejection drugs for the rest of your life. Your life expectancy will be reduced and your quality of life will be reduced. That's better than the other option at the time, which was lying on the surgery table. But I said it's ridiculous that you've got to this stage. There has to be something that was triggering the autoimmunity in your place. That's something that we just hadn't found. And I think it was a good couple of hours, 3 hours, whatever it was, I went through everything I could think of that could possibly relate to your liver, just to see if there was anything else we'd be missing, if we could avoid you having the transplant at any costs, if it was possible. And eventually all the different tests we were doing, all the neurological tests and the muscle tests, we found that the only thing that seemed to tie it all together was one tooth. And we had to speak to you about it. Oh, okay, that's a bit odd. And it was a crown. And the way I was looking at it was there an infection underneath there that couldn't escape, and your body was then sort of creating an immune reaction and started attacking the good tissue. And I think when we spoke about it afterwards, I think you'd had the crown maybe a year or so prior to all the symptoms beginning to start.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember being at university, but it was before those symptoms started, and those couple of really nasty bouts of food poisoning, and that being muddled actually, and being quite moody and not, I was moody, I admit it, moody and not struggling at times really to keep a grasp on things at different points. And those are all symptoms that you see associated with autoimmune hepatitis, with autoimmune conditions, that kind of mugginess, that confusion, and you feel silly for it as well. You think, oh, come on, shake yourself out of it. But yeah, so yeah, you made that discovery, and then obviously we started on the next part of our journey. I said, well, we've got to give this a shot.
Well, that was the only thing we found, and I think we said at the time, I've no idea if this is going to help or not, but hey, why not just, because it's you being my sister-in-law, knowing you well, and we're going to try everything to try and avoid it, so have it taken out. And we went to a specialist place, didn't you, in Berkshire, and yeah, and they did the work there, didn't they? They removed it and they did the detox at the time there as well, which is quite an ordeal and it was expensive. But later,
well, yeah, the success so quickly after that when I was back in touch with the hospital, they were baffled by my blood results, baffled by my overall health, and I'd explained what I'd done, and they didn't say much in response to that, apart from, well, you don't need a transplant anymore, so we'll take you off the list and see us in 6 months.
And those words.
Yeah, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm completely grateful for all the different support they've given, but they didn't want to discuss that, and that's okay.
But the fact that they said to you, you don't need a transplant after going through all the procedure for this massive operation. And
and it
was that was phenomenal.
It is absolutely huge. Sorry, I realised I was a bit like, yeah, don't need transplant. No, it was absolutely huge at the time, because I do still remember being in the hospital when I was first really poorly, being told you need a transplant, and having those moments on my own of, oh my goodness, I'm not going to make this, and I'm not ready not to make it. I want to live my life. I want to keep going, but this might be all I've got. And it was, but at the time, it was like, this is your only option. So incredibly, due to your vision and your action and how proactive you are, we tried it all out with the dentistry and did some delicious detoxes. Those were tough, but you know, they were worth it. They were worth it. And it was a great process in that obviously it was difficult and emotionally challenging, but it just makes you realise how you can be so accountable for your body. You should be anyway, but actually your bodies are so strong. And actually when I saw the guys in Bedford, they were like, actually, you've been being told for a long time that you're already sick, you've been fighting off a huge infection for years. You're actually really tough. I was like, oh, okay, I'll take that. That's fine. That's good. Yeah, it's a really good way of reframing it. And and I'm so grateful because, you know, you want to hold on to your body parts if you can, as best you can. Also, I mean, it's a very costly procedure to do a transplant. I don't take any of it lightly. And also, I think we all must do all that we can to help ourselves. And you're able to, you've always done it for me, but you're able to make sure I do that carefully, sensibly, and correctly. There's so much that I just wouldn't be here without you. And I'm not saying it to make you feel good or anything, but I wouldn't be, and that's the truth. That's a fact. And it just shows you how you can take your life in a different direction. There are other ways. Keep your eyes open and be open and be proactive as well. Proactive is a key word, I think, here. So
well, I mean, every time you hear that story, it's very emotional because we were in it and we lived it from the outside. So to see you come through the other side, and what I thought was glorious as well was because for a long time your life had been on hold, hadn't it? Because you had been so full, you sort of eventually you reduced your working hours down to part-time. You couldn't really form lasting relationships. But then after that had happened, through no fault of your own, just because you literally weren't able to, were you, energy-wise? But then how long afterwards until you met Mike?
We met, this will be our 2nd year anniversary, 3 years. So really bad with the maths. We met in the January. About a year or so later, I think.
It's almost at the that block, and it just happened, didn't it?
It was totally like that. It was, my life just opened up in numerous ways. And I also started running. I started being so much more active. I had energy like I'd never had before. I've always been an enthusiastic person. I think sometimes people think, oh, enthusiastic, she's got loads of energy. But I always remember a friend of mine saying to me, I wish your body could keep up with your head. And now it kind of feels like it's starting to do that. And I didn't have that. Whereas, when I've been to the hospital, this is about a year or so ago, maybe more than that, when I told them about, my exercise regime and what I do and what my lifestyle's like, you shouldn't be able to do that. I'm like, well, I can, and I'm healthy and I'm well, and you're telling me my blood results are good and that I'm doing really well and I've lost weight, because I was kind of trudging through mud. I think it's probably the best way of putting it. It was, I did feel muddled and slow and heavy and kind of very alone with it as well, because it's an odd one to describe. I don't know how else just, you feel isolated when you're going through something like that, but you guys were amazing, whole family were amazing, my friends were amazing, so many people, and I do feel like I've got my life back and then some. It feels like so much more appreciative.
And marrying Mike, which is, I think it's just a lovely story, isn't it? I mean, something like that. Sorry, carry on.
I was everything with Mike as well, like the perfect timing of that, in that he'd moved to Worthing a month before we met, and you just see things slotting in, and you think, we wouldn't have, if we'd met before, we would have obviously been attracted to each other, but we were very different headspaces then, very different situations, and it did, like you say, it totally opened up my life. It was like releasing a blockage, a big blockage, and taking that away and going, off you go, sort of thing. Yeah.
Problem with autoimmune disease, because it can affect any different area, so many different areas it can affect directly like that, it's really, really hard to find that one thing that maybe has started. There's a genetic aspect as well. Obviously, we know that your dad has autoimmune disease as well, so it would have been a tendency somewhere along the line, give it the perfect storm, give it those conditions, and something could have happened in that area. So I think, obviously, I'm very fortunate, and I've said this to many people, that I'm so fortunate to be able to train in things like biokinesiology, quantum neurology, and afferent input to find that one bit for you that we could then, it can be dealt with. And thankfully, it was the missing link for you. And we can't always find it because it's not always available. But because you're always so enthusiastic and trying to do everything you can do to help yourself, I think even when you came through all that, you still have that vitality to live your life again. And I think it's a lovely story. But as you said, it's taking responsibility for yourself as well. And actually, things aren't always black and white. And something I always do keep in mind is anything can cause anything. And I've mentioned this story to a few people before. But Tim, well, how does that work then? But it's not here. It's not one place. It's affecting the entire body, the entire nervous system, the entire immune system. And yeah, I mean, obviously that is it's a great story. It's a lovely story. I think it's a really nice one to share as well, because anything can cause anything. And I said, really, you get married. That's the lovely icing on the cake.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, we're so happy, and so many other things as well that I went for and tried. And I became more creative as a process of that. I'm a creative person anyway, but even more so, I started doing things that I would have always held back on before. So yeah, it completely opened up my life, and I think it made my relationships with my family and my friends stronger and better and more vital. Yeah, it's incredible. It is an incredible story, and but it's true also. It's gonna happen, and it's stick at it and believe and reach out to good people who can help you. Absolutely.
And let's say you can't always find that point, but there are things you can do by looking after things. And if you can't find the actual nub, then do everything else. Strengthen up your system as much as possible. Eat the right foods, as we've said so many times. Get rid of the rubbish. Look after it. Give your body the best possible chance it can. And it's always about inflammation. Inflammation you can have a good effect on.
Yeah. I think also one thing that I really felt that I learned about this, before I got to that point where I'm so much better now, I'd always thought of my body as being outside of me, something else, this thing I'm carrying around. Now, I feel like I am my body. I feel so much more connected to my body. And it's not, I was treating it a bit like this problem that I'm carrying around. Like, oh, it's done this today. Oh, my stupid body's done this. Like, stop that. You are your body. There's nothing stupid about it. Your body is always working to deal with something. It's always doing the best it can for you. It's not playing a trick on you. It's reacting to something. And that's what it's trying to do.
100%, yeah. Nothing happens by chance. It is a reason for it.
Absolutely. And I think it's really tough when you're in the middle of those things to remember that, but your body will always try to protect you. It's not the bad guy, it's you.
That's very, very true. That's a good point. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. It's a story that I know every time Julie hears it, she's in tears. So it's wonderful. I'm so glad you're my sister-in-law.
I'm so glad you're my brother-in-law. It's worked out very well for me. It's really nice to share. I really hope it helps.
I'd like to thank Sandy so much for sharing her story with us. She's an inspiring person at the best of times. Are we saying, though, that this is the answer to every autoimmune disease? No, of course not. But in Sandy's case, we found the tipping point, the thing that sent her immune system over the edge. No one really knows why autoimmune disease starts, but there are quite a few risk factors that are well known. And it's interesting to note how many of those she did actually have beforehand. So familial disposition, so her genetics. Her father has autoimmune disease. Acute infection, she had the food poisoning when she started at university. Stress, she had a lot of stress moving home, starting university. Her father was unwell at the time as well, and that can have a real big impact just to tip things over the edge. But the big part, the main issue, seemed to be the hidden chronic infection all the time underneath that crown, which the immune system was working away at in the background, but unable to get to. So the overall load was just too much, and by reducing that load, she was able to be less reactive and therefore function more optimally. And here's just a little slideshow of her progression. Here she is at the outset, looking quite jaundiced and not particularly well at the time, before things really started getting worse. Here she is after a surgery, still relieving, as she always does. As she came out of hospital, meet up with the sister properly, looking less jaundiced there. And the culprit, that's the crown that was causing the problems. And finally, the result. That was her on a wedding day a couple of years ago now.